When I moved into apartment 307, I thought I had found the perfect place. Cheap rent, quiet neighborhood, no noisy neighbors. But on my first night there, I found a list taped to the inside of the kitchen cabinet. At first I thought it was just instructions left by the previous tenant. Things like taking out the trash or turning off the stove. But when I started reading the list, I realized something was very wrong. Because these weren't normal instructions, they were rules. And every single one of them was written like a warning. At the top of the paper, someone had written in large, shaky letters, "Rules for surviving in apartment 307. Moving in the building itself was old, not abandoned, but definitely aging. The hallway lights flickered slightly, and the elevator made a grinding noise every time it moved between floors. But the rent was unbelievably cheap for the area. That should have been my first red flag. When the landlord showed me the apartment, he barely spoke. He unlocked the door, handed me the key, and said only one thing before leaving. If you hear knocking after midnight, ignore it. At the time, I assumed he was joking. Looking back now, I wish I had asked more questions. The apartment itself looked normal. A small living room, a narrow kitchen, one bedroom, one bathroom, nothing unusual. The only strange thing I noticed was the door across the hallway. Apartment 308. The door looked old, older than the others, and there were scratch marks around the handle, deep ones, like someone had tried very hard to get out. The list later that night, I was unpacking groceries in the kitchen when I opened the cabinet above the sink. That's when I saw the paper. It was taped to the inside of the cabinet door. The handwriting looked rushed, uneven, almost desperate. At first I thought it was just a joke left by the previous tenant, but the longer I read, the less funny it seemed. At the top of the page it said, "Rules for apartment 307." Underneath were several numbered rules. Rule number 1, do not answer the door after 11 p.m., even if you are expecting someone, even if they say they are the landlord. No one should be knocking at that time. Rule number 2, if you hear footsteps in the hallway after midnight, do not look through the peephole. Sometimes it will knock. Ignore it. It will eventually leave. Rule number 3, if the bathroom light turns on by itself, close the door immediately. Wait at least 10 minutes before opening it again. Do not look in the mirror during that time. I remember laughing a little at this point. It sounded like something from a horror movie. Still, I kept reading. Rule number 4, never open the door to apartment 308, no matter what you hear inside. That rule made me pause, because earlier that evening, I had noticed that apartment, the scratch door, the strange feeling it gave me. Still, curiosity pushed me forward. Rule number 5, if you wake up and see someone standing in the corner of your bedroom, pretend you are still asleep. Do not acknowledge it. It will leave eventually. At that point, the laughter stopped. My stomach tightened slightly. Who writes something like this? And why leave it behind? Rule number 6, if you hear someone whisper your name from the kitchen, do not go investigate. The previous tenant did. There was no explanation after that sentence. Just a long scratch across the paper, as if the pen had dragged across it violently. First night, by the time I finished reading the list, it was already late, almost midnight. I told myself it was just an elaborate prank, someone trying to scare the next tenant. Still, I left the paper where it was. Something about it made me uncomfortable. Around 12:30 a.m., I was sitting in the living room watching videos on my phone when I heard something. A sound coming from the hallway outside the apartment. Footsteps. Slow. Dragging. Someone was walking past my door. I froze, because the steps didn't sound normal. They were uneven, like whoever was walking had difficulty moving. Step. Drag. Step. Drag. The footsteps stopped directly outside my door. Then 3 slow knocks echoed through the apartment. Knock, knock, knock. My heart started beating faster. For a moment, I thought about opening the door. Maybe it was just a neighbor. Then I remembered the first rule. Do not answer the door after 11 p.m., so I stayed silent. The knocking came again, louder this time. Knock, knock, knock. Then a voice spoke from the other side of the door. Soft, almost whispering, "Hello." It sounded like an old woman. "I know you're inside." My hands went cold, because I hadn't made any noise. The voice continued. "Please open the door. I live next door." Something about the way she said it felt wrong. The voice sounded stretched, like someone imitating a human voice. The knocking stopped. For several minutes, everything was silent. Then the footsteps started again. Step, drag, step, drag, slowly moving away down the hallway. That was the moment I realized something terrifying. The rules might not be a joke. The next rule later that night, I went back to the kitchen and looked at the paper again. I hadn't noticed before, but the list continued below the 6th rule, and the handwriting there looked even worse. Shakier, more desperate. The next line read, Rule number 7. If apartment 308 ever opens, leave the building immediately. And underneath that rule, someone had written a final sentence, not as a rule, more like a warning. The ink looked darker, like it had been pressed harder into the paper. The sentence said, "It learned how to knock." I didn't sleep much after that first night. Every small sound inside the apartment made me jump. The hum of the refrigerator, the creaking pipes in the walls, even the wind outside brushing against the windows. But nothing else strange happened that night. Eventually, exhaustion forced me to fall asleep. When I woke up the next morning, sunlight was coming through the blinds. For a moment, everything felt normal again, almost peaceful. I walked into the kitchen and immediately looked at the cabinet. The paper was still there, the list of rules. Seeing it again in daylight made it seem less threatening, almost ridiculous. I convinced myself it was nothing more than a creepy joke left by the previous tenant. Still, I decided to keep the paper, just in case. The neighbor later that afternoon, I stepped into the hallway to take out the trash. The building was quiet, too quiet. Most of the apartments on my floor looked empty. Mail piled up under several doors. When I reached the hallway trash room, I heard someone behind me. New tenant. I turned around. An older man stood near the elevator. He looked to be in his 70s, thin gray hair, and very tired eyes. "Yeah," I said. "Apartment 37. The man stared at me for a moment, then he slowly shook his head. "You shouldn't have taken that one." A chill ran down my spine. "Why not?" I asked. He looked down the hallway, toward apartment 308, then he spoke quietly. "The last 3 tenants didn't stay long." "What do you mean?" "They left in the middle of the night." I tried to laugh it off. "Bad neighbors." The old man didn't smile. No, he leaned closer. I heard the knocking. My stomach tightened. "From where?" I asked. But I already knew the answer. The man slowly raised a trembling finger and pointed directly at the door of apartment 308. The second night that night, I tried to ignore everything. The list, the strange rules, the neighbor's warning. I told myself the same thing over and over. It was just an old building. Old buildings make noises. Around 11:30 p.m., I locked the door and sat in the living room. Midnight passed. Nothing happened. For a moment I started feeling relieved. Maybe the first night had just been coincidence. Maybe someone really had been knocking. Then the bathroom light suddenly turned on. By itself. I stared down the hallway. The bathroom door was open. Bright white light spilled into the living room. My heart began racing. Slowly, I stood up. Then I remembered something. Rule number 3, if the bathroom light turns on by itself, close the door immediately. I walked down the hallway carefully. The light inside the bathroom flickered slightly, but the room looked empty. Still, I pushed the door shut and waited. 10 minutes felt like an hour. Finally, I opened the door again. The bathroom looked completely normal, except for one thing. The mirror above the sink had words written across it, in fog. 3 simple words. Wrong apartment. The knocking returns around 1 a.m. The knocking started again. This time it wasn't at my door. It was coming from across the hallway, from apartment 308. Knock, knock, knock. Slow, heavy, like something inside was hitting the door from the other side. Then I heard a voice, a whisper, soft, desperate. "Help me." The voice sounded like a young woman. "Please, let me out." My body froze. Every instinct told me someone was trapped inside. Maybe the door was stuck. Maybe someone really needed help. I walked slowly toward my front door. Then I remembered the rule again. Never open the door to apartment 308. No matter what you hear inside. The voice became louder, panicked. "I can't breathe in here. Please." My hand rested on the doorknob. All I had to do was open the door. Just check. Just see if someone needed help. But something stopped me, because the voice suddenly changed. Mid-sentence, it became deeper. Wrong, like multiple voices speaking together. "Let me out." The knocking stopped, and then something terrifying happened. The door to apartment 308 slowly creaked open. The hallway light flickered. The door across from my apartment moved slowly outward, just a few inches, then more. Darkness filled the space behind it. I couldn't see inside. The air in the hallway suddenly felt colder, thicker, and then a long, thin hand slowly appeared from the darkness. The fingers were far too long. The skin looked pale and stretched tight over the bones. The hand gripped the doorframe. Then another hand appeared, and another. Something inside was pulling itself out. My heart pounded so loudly I thought it might hear me. Slowly, a tall shape began emerging from the apartment. Its head scraped lightly against the top of the doorframe. Its body looked twisted, unnatural. Then it turned its head toward my door, and I heard something that made my blood run cold. 3 slow knocks. From my door. Knock, knock, knock. The same pattern as the first night. The creature spoke softly. Its voice sounded exactly like the old woman from before. "I know you're inside." My body refused to move. The creature leaned closer to my door. Then it whispered something else, something that made my stomach drop, because this time, it spoke using my voice, perfectly. "Open the door." The last rule. Panic flooded through my chest. I ran to the kitchen, my hands shaking. I grabbed the paper again, the list of rules. My eyes scanned the bottom, and that's when I noticed something I hadn't seen before. A final line had appeared, one that hadn't been there yesterday. The handwriting looked frantic, almost carved into the paper. It said, "Final rule, if it ever learns your voice, leave immediately." I didn't wait. I grabbed my jacket and ran to the door. Behind me, the knocking grew louder, more aggressive. The creature spoke again, still using my voice. "Don't leave. Stay. Open the door." I unlocked the door and ran into the hallway. The thing from apartment 308 was already halfway across the hall, its long arms stretched toward me. Its face had no features, just smooth, pale skin, except for a mouth that slowly opened into a wide smile. I ran down the hallway, down the stairs, out of the building. I didn't stop running until I reached the street. When I finally looked back at the building, I saw something standing at the window of apartment 308, watching me, perfectly still. And even from that distance, I could see it smiling. Ending. I never went back for my things. The landlord never answered my calls. The apartment listing disappeared the next day, but sometimes, late at night, I get phone calls from unknown numbers, and when I answer, I hear my own voice on the other end whispering, "Come back."